man, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to do a mid-month wrap-up where I wrap up all the books I've read in the first half of July of 2022. I've currently read 8 books. I've read a couple books I've really enjoyed this month, but for the most part, I've had mostly duds this month, which is quite sad. Hopefully the second half of the month will be better. There's a lot of bad books I read this month. A lot of books that I gave like 1 to 2 stars. So let's just go in order of when I read them. So I started off the month, actually I read this mostly in June, but I started off the month with finishing The Hacienda by Isabel Canas. So this is kind of like a retelling of Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, but set in following the Spanish Civil War in 1890. So Beatriz, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name right, she was rebel's daughter, and he got killed in the Mexican War of Independence, and because of that, she and her mother are kind of left destitute. So she decides to marry a wealthy man and goes to live at his house in the country. He has this like massive estate, and long story short, there's some mystery as to what happened to his wife. She meets this priest that she kind of seeks his help with because there's weird stuff going on in the house, kind of haunting stuff. I ended up giving this 1 star, and I feel really bad because the premise and like the first 50 pages, I was loving this book. I love the setup. Beatriz, for me, wasn't a really likable character. I mean, she's marrying this guy not because she loves him, but literally for money. But I also could understand her. Like, she was in a position where she didn't really have a choice. She wasn't in the position that she could marry for love. So I could understand her. I didn't exactly agree with her choices. And the other thing the book does rather well, I won't say it does better than like Daphne du Maurier, is it is really good with the gothic ambiance, the dark descriptions, the looming sinister presence that is just outside the realm of what the reader can see. And I really loved the detailed descriptions that are included in this book. But those were like the only 2 things positive I can say about this book. First of all, unlike Rebecca, spoilers for Rebecca if you haven't read it. There's nothing supernatural kind of going on in Rebecca, but in this one, it goes like all the way with its ghosts. The explanation is ghosts. Yes, there is more of a realistic and human evil that is around, but it's not the focus of the book. Most of the focus is on the ghosts and Beatriz dealing with being attacked and like surrounded by these dark spirits that are in the house. This is just my beef with the book. It's one of the most anti-Catholic books I have read in a long time. So the main love interest, and I emphasize love interest, he's a Catholic priest who's a witch, and he knew he was a witch when he became a Catholic priest, and yet he doesn't see an issue with that. Anyone who knows anything about Catholicism or like witchcraft, those 2 belief systems do not go together. I'm sorry, they're not aligned, they're like opposite, okay? I really struggled with that in the book because like you have zero understanding of Catholicism, especially when this is set in Mexico. If it was set in the modern day, I'd be like, If it was like set in the modern day America, I'd be like, okay, you know, the world nowadays is like skewy. But it's set back in the late 1800s. It's set in a very Catholic society. There's very few Catholic ideals in this society that were shown in the book. So on surface level, there seems to be a great understanding of like Mexico during this time, but underneath the level, I was very confused about how the societal understanding of religion, because nowadays we're very much used to like, maybe there's some people who are religious, but a lot of people aren't anymore. However, back then, especially in Mexico, because it was a very highly Christian society, you know, you had a culture that was built around Christianity and religion. So it's not like nowadays where there's this firm separation between like state and religion. Back then, it wasn't like that. And I feel like the author completely missed any of the understanding of the deep connection between Catholicism, Christianity in general, and the Mexican culture. But besides that, like, I understand that's just a me problem more, and if you aren't Catholic, you probably won't mind that. But for me, there were a lot of other issues with this book. So the book jumps between Andre, the priest's perspective, and Beatriz, and Andre's perspective, honestly, didn't really need to be there for me, so I didn't care at all about his perspective. The only perspective I care about was Beatriz, and I started disliking her more and more as the book progressed. At the beginning, I was like, yeah, I don't really like her, but I also understand her. And as the book progressed, I was like, this lady is crazy. Yes, it's a supernatural book, but also it's a mystery, and the mystery solution was very underwhelming. I read a lot of mysteries, so for me, like, if the mystery isn't good, I'm not impressed. And the scenes of like fighting ghosts, I won't get more into that because spoilers, but the scenes of fighting ghosts were just so over the top and ridiculous. I could not take them seriously. I at one point laughed out loud when they're having this very tough fight with a ghost, and I'm just like laughing my head off. So that's not a good sign. So yeah, long story short, I gave this 1 star. And after that, coming back, I wanted like a very light book to just get me back into reading. So I read Lethal Lobster, which is the 3rd book of the cruise ship mysteries by Hope Callaghan. I own the first, I think, 8 books, but it's just a light, I mean, each book like does not take me long to read. It's very light mysteries. I'm currently actually reading the 4th book, and basically it follows Millie, this woman who is middle-aged. Her husband cheated on her, so she decided to get a job, and she became an assistant cruise director on this cruise ship. So there's murder mysteries going on the cruise ship, and each one of these mysteries is just light and fun. I give it this 3 stars. I don't think I liked it as much as the previous 2, but it wasn't a bad book. Like, they're fun. They're very forgettable, but they're the type of books you can just like read very easily. The next one I read was Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. This was a reread for me, but I haven't read it in at least 3 or so years. And I think maybe my style of reading, my understanding of reading, and my tastes have changed so much that I noticed a lot of different things in here, especially since I watch a lot of the live action adaptations of Pride and Prejudice, and so it stood out to me the differences between the adaptation and this book. And oh gosh, I just love this book every time I read it. Just the nuanced understanding of the characters, and in the book, as opposed to the shows, different adaptations they've made, you don't have a lot of internal monologue in the movies as opposed to in the book. So there's so much more nuanced understanding of things. And no offense, but I'm actually not a fan of how they presented Mr. Darcy in the 2005 version. Oh my gosh, everyone's gonna come at me now. He's not bad. He's just very bland. And I think it's because specifically in the book it said Darcy realizes that yes, he was given good morals but left to follow them in pride and conceit. Like, he literally says that in the 1995 version. Both these characters are very flawed, and they realize their flaws and try to rectify them and become better people. But in the 2005 version, and most of the adaptations, to be honest, you don't see that shift. You don't see that change because Darcy's fine. It's just Lizzie's misunderstandings of him. And I feel like that's what's lacking in a lot of adaptations. But this book is just so good because it is about 2 flawed individuals that end up falling in love. And for those who don't know the plot, it follows Elizabeth Bennet, who is the second of 5 sisters, who lives in a Regency rural culture, and in town comes this wealthy man, and one of his friends is this prideful Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy, and Lizzie and Darcy end up conflicting, and then Darcy ends up falling in love with her, proposing. She refuses, and in the end they end up getting married after a whole bunch of drama, and I'm not getting into it. I probably gave too many spoilers, but this is a great book. I gave it 5 stars. The next book I did a full rant review for. That was The Duke Alone by Christy Caldwell. I was not planning to do that book review, but like after I finished it, I was like, yeah, I need to talk about this book. So I posted that video. And I ended up giving this 2 stars. Wasn't a huge fan. If you want to hear my full thoughts about it, I will link my rant review down in the description. The next one, one of my favorite books this month, and that was The Red House Mystery by A.A. Milne. This is the author of the Winnie Pooh series, and I read this for the Black Hearts Book Club. And I won't give too many spoilers because I know we're going to be doing a live stream next Saturday. I'll announce that further down on the road. But me and Very Literary Carrie are going to be doing a live stream talking about this book, so I won't talk about it much now. But I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. This is a really great, like, cozy mystery. I believe it was released in the 1920s, so it has that very Agatha Christie feel. And yeah, so far it's my favorite book I've read this month that hasn't been a reread. The next one I read was another buddy read. I read it with Katya, and that was The Court Dancer by Shin Kyung-sook. I read another of Shin's books, and she's just an exceptional author. She's a very flowery author, so it is hard to read her books and not be entirely bored. I ended up switching to audiobook for this one and listening to it like 2 times the speed just to like get through the descriptions, because the descriptions for me really bog down the narrative. But basically it follows Ijin, who is this young woman who is an orphan. She is taken into the court of the king in Chosun in Korea. It's the final like dynasty in Korea, before Japan officially took over Korea in like 1910, but unofficially they were kind of in charge of for 1897. And so it's set between the 1880s all the way to the 1890s. So it takes place over maybe a 10-year time period. And Ijin gets the attention of the French legate, and he falls in love with her, Victor, and she ends up going with him to France. So you have a very interesting dichotomy, French culture and Korean culture, and just the vast differences between the two. And you see Victor like struggling to fit into the Korean culture, and then you see Ijin struggling to fit into the French culture. And I really loved that element. It's probably my favorite period in Korean history is the 1880s. So I loved learning more about the detailed culture and just the way that Shin presents the world, the Korean court. And mostly it's, I believe, set in Seoul. The ending is miserable. The ending is horrible. Part spoilers, but I feel like if you know Korean history, you'll know that this happens. Queen Min, who is the queen, she was assassinated in 1897, which is when Japan was able to actually take over Korea. That is documented in the book, and it's a rather horrific scene because basically Japanese men broke into the palace and killed a whole bunch of ladies in waitings to the queen, and then eventually killed the queen. Pretty horrific. They're still like not quite sure exactly what happened. I'm not sure if maybe they are sure what happened now, but there was a lot of misinformation around the whole thing at the time. So it's a sad historical incident. So that is near the ending of this book, and it's quite sad. And the ending of Ijin's life is even more sad. So I really didn't like how the ending went. Like, I understood that Queen Min had to die because historically she has to die, but Ijin's end I was very disappointed with. So yeah, I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed it. There was a lot to appreciate, but 1, it was slow, and 2, I really disliked the ending. The next one I actually finished just a couple of days ago. That is The Rip in Time by Kelly Armstrong. So it follows Mallory, who is this U.S., I believe she's from New York City. She's a police detective that is visiting her family and specifically her dying grandmother in Edinburgh, Scotland, when she is attacked in the shadows and strangled to death, she believes, and she wakes up in the body of a 19th century maid who she also witnessed being strangled. So basically, they were being strangled by different killers 150 years separate. And Mallory switches bodies with Katrina. We don't actually know if Katrina goes to the modern world because the ending was unsatisfactory for me. I'll just say that. But so Mallory, the book is centered on Mallory trying to figure out what murders are going on in Edinburgh, Scotland, as well as how she can get home. The second of which is not concluded at the end of the book. I was expecting it to be a series, but I didn't know they just stop it after the mystery, so we have no solution to if Katrina is in Mallory's modern body and what is going on. So I was a little bit disappointed with Andy. I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars, simply because I understand Mallory is from our era, but she had a lot of modern prejudices to the Victorian era. I also realized that if I went back to Victorian era, I would probably have 90% of those same prejudices. So I can't critique her for that, but I personally like to look at every era for its own merit and not be very judgy with it. And she was constantly judging everybody for it. It didn't feel like the author was even conscious that all these biases were in Mallory's character. The final book I finished this month is Another one I was disappointed at. The final book I finished yesterday is Murder at Mayfair Hotel by C.J. Archer, which is a Victorian murder mystery. It follows this young woman who goes to stay with her uncle after her grandmother dies, and he owns this massive hotel in New York City. It's a very fancy hotel. One of the guests is murdered, and she has to solve the mystery. And on the surface, I would say I would really like it because it's the type of cozy historical mystery I like, but it just felt so long and drawn out. Like nothing really happened, and there was too much space between each clue. There were too many throwaway characters and scenes. So while like if I broke the mystery down to the bare bones, I think I would have liked it, and I did like it. I gave it 3 stars. I gave it 2 stars. It wasn't like it was the worst book I've ever read. It's just, to me, it wasn't meh. And I just don't think I like C.J. Archer because I read the Watchmaker's Daughter, I think it was, and I didn't like that one either. So yeah, I just don't think that author is for me. So I'm currently reading 3 books right now. I have more books to get to, but I'm currently reading Deadly Deception, which is the 4th book in the cruise ship mysteries. I'm enjoying this one. Actually, I really like this better than the previous one so far, but I'm only like 40 pages in, so I'm not that far in. The other one, I'm about a third of the way in, and that's The Nurse's Secret by Amanda Skenendor. And this one I talked about in new releases that were coming out in June. I don't remember what month this book came out, but it tells the story of this young woman who is a thief on the streets in the Victorian era, and she gets falsely accused of murder. She breaks out of prison and escapes, and she decides to go into hiding in this nurses program. So that's basically where I'm at right now. And so far I really don't like the main character, but I have a feeling, because she's like literally plotting to steal from everyone she sees, but I also have a feeling that she's hopefully going to have a transformation and see what she's doing is wrong and become a more moral character as the story comes on. If not, then I'm really going to dislike this book, but hopefully it gets better. So, and then the last one I'm reading is Chinese Myths and Tales. I'm not enjoying this that much. I'm only 100 pages in, and I'm really finding it tedious to read. I try to read 5 to 10 stories every single day, and half the time I just avoid reading them until I'm too tired in the evening to actually read them. So yeah, I'm kind of disappointed with this so far. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, like, subscribe. I post every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!